Thank you for listening to the Living Zen-podcast. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can take the next step in developing your own Zen practice, or how you can more formally connect with our community, please explore our online Orientation to Zen practice, which you can find on our website at zenwest.ca. If you enjoy the resources that we make available online, we would very much appreciate your support. There are a number of ways that you can help us continue to do the work we do. One of the best ways is by becoming a part of our community as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen-podcast, eZendo, and our online Orientation to Zen will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and at Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also made available for free on our website for all of our members and associates. You may also want to download the Living Zen Podcast app, which makes downloading and listening to the podcast effortless. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening to Living Zen.
Or not. And I'm wondering, is that the point? Or does it matter? Sometimes I just get frustrated and I just do my own thing, because I would fall into my own rhythm. So I was kind of experimenting with that.
Well, maybe I can answer by way of a story. Yeah, well, no, there is a teaching there, right? Like, I think one of the things, Zen is known as being a very experiential school, right? So we have this teaching of interdependent co-origination, like we're all intimately connected. And this is a very powerful, very concrete sort of like, Joe at the front of the line can't keep in step, and the whole line's doing the sort of shake and shimmy, right? So a couple of things is, you first of all, you realize that as we walk, you're drifting in and out. Like sometimes you're sort of connected to what's going on, you're making relationship, you're sort of in this relaxed but aware state, and you're just walking in step. And it doesn't require any sharp energy or anything like that. It's all, and then you're like, oh, I wonder what so-and-so's doing, and then you look down and they're walking one way and you're walking the other. And it's always fun on Tuesdays for me, because when you get that line of people where that's happening sort of like all down the line, you sort of see it. So it's a very concrete demonstration of that teaching of how we affect one another and make each other suffer. It's a small suffering, but it's a concrete example of how we impact each other positively or negatively. From the perspective of practice, I think it's a great experiment of finding sort of the middle way in practice. And you talked about kind of both of the extremes. One is sort of you can get a headache trying to, and the story behind this is where I was trained, a lot of the sessions, this man would come who was a mathematics professor at a university. And he was a classic genius, had white hair like this. And apparently the legend is like he used to write code for the United States government, like really super genius math guy. And so he sat on my right side during a session one time, and I was amazed because the thing that struck me was he couldn't count 1, 2, right? So like walking meditation, Kinhin is just 1, 2, 1, 2. And for 7 days he was in front of me, and that entire time, not only could he not keep in step, but he seemed incapable of doing any consistent step whatsoever. Like it was like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, and like
random.
And I was totally random. And I was like, I don't know, 20, 23 years old, and just like Zen is supposed to be done this way, and so I don't know what he was. He also was a bit of a devil as far as he would see people like me. He'd been practicing Zen for a long time, and he'd see people wound up like me, and
he was doing this on purpose.
And consciously be a great bodhisattva. You'd come out of buildings with your robes on and everything like that, and he'd be behind you, and he'd pull one of the many ties that we have on one of these things, and you'd be like, the rest of the time back to the Zendo trying to... Anyways, I learned a lot walking behind him, and one of the things that I learned was... Actually, one of the things I learned is if you look at the guy in front of him, but that there's two ways you can go about it. The first is that you can get really tense and try to do it like, I've got to stay in step, and every little misstep trip that the person does, you're like doing this sort of shadow thing. And that's exhausting. And then the other thing you can do is to go, oh, whatever, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And and then everyone behind you is cursing you because you're doing what he was doing before. But then the other way is this sort of middle way of practice where you're just relaxed. And one of the things that I find is, if you're not looking directly at the person's feet in front of you, but you sort of bring your vision up to like their shoulders and actually watch the shoulders of the person in front of you. And rather than sort of like focusing on trying to keep in step, it's like trying to manifest harmoniously. The image, or the image that's often used is like a dragon with many legs, right? So, or a centipede, where all the legs on one side have to work together for the thing to sort of go anywhere.
And we're not going anywhere.
And so the place to find is just this sort of relaxed balance where you're opening up your awareness, not just to the person in front of you, but to the whole line. And then just allowing your body to sort of slip into the practice of walking together, rather than trying to get yourself there with your head all the time. I find that is usually the best way. Because if you're too focused, this environment is really nice because everything's flat and it's warm and there's no wild animals around or anything like that. But we do I've done walking meditation in pretty crazy places where the Jikijitsu suddenly does a fast 180 because there's like a big rattlesnake in the middle of the path, and like we gotta go the other way now. Or just all kinds of crazy. Even at the Zen Centre, there's big hills and cars coming sometimes. So if you're focused on the person's feet in front of you, you can't be responsive. And I think that this is also a great metaphor about how to practice our lives all the time. Sometimes we think, oh, I need to do my Zen practice, and we get into this sort of like really rigid state. Either when we're sitting, it's like, oh, I've got to do Zen, and it's really tight, or the opposite, where we're sitting or we're doing the dishes or whatever, and we're just like doing, whatever it is we want to do, and then crash, something happens, And so, just like in walking meditation, in all the practice, I think it's just this sort of state of aware, relaxed, but present. So, yeah.
I just want to comment on that. When we did the first walk, I was definitely looking at the feet, getting way more fumbled up.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was like I was trying to control it, make it perfect.
Yeah.
And I go to a therapist, and I saw her today, and that's one thing that I talked about is I'm a recovering perfectionist. And then the second time we walked, I moved my gaze up and just reminded myself just to let it flow.
Mm-hmm.
So much easier.
Totally, yeah.
And I didn't really fumble that much, and it just was, so much easier.
All of Zen is like a big candy for people who are perfectionists. And it's kind of a setup, because it's like there are so many anal details involved that no human being could possibly get them all right all the time. And I've come to realize that like it's set up intentionally like that. Because it gives you the illusion like, this I understand, and this I can do. But once you get involved in it, you realize, oh my God, like there's just no way. And as soon as you start to get sort of like proficiency with something, they'll say, oh, I think it's time for you to learn this role. And then, and eventually you come to this place where you just, exactly that. You're kind of like, maybe I just need to relax a little bit and apply myself as fully as I can to what I'm doing without all these expectations and disappointments and all that. So, yeah, you're not the only sort of recovering perfectionist in Zen, I'll tell you that for sure.
In life.
In what?
Too outside of here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And white.
Hmm?
No.
Somebody wants to do everything perfect. You're kind of a perfectionist too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a bad thing. It's just knowing when to let certain.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.